Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here on this Monday afternoon, evening, depending on your time zone. It's really an honor to be here to talk about EL excellence every day. 6 essentials to raise English learner achievement, and really the achievement of all students. I want to start this webinar by really focusing on why we're even here, why we even are talking about achievement for students. And I'd like you to think about if you could think about the students that you serve. So if you are a teacher, it may be the students in your own classroom. If you're a coach or an instructional leader, it could be the students in all of the classrooms of the people that you serve. If you are a leader, administrator, all of the schools, think of the students you most want to impact. What is one of your most urgent priorities in terms of student achievement, in terms of student learning that you want to see move this year? Another way to think about it is if you could wave a magic wand and make sure that every student could excel in a new way where they've previously struggled, what would it be? So please use the chat feature right now, and it is at the bottom of your screen. Click on chat and reply and go ahead and type in a word or phrase to share a goal, a vision you have for student learning. What is something that is a priority in your setting that people are collaborating to realize for students? Equity, speaking confidence, independence, become better writers, reading comprehension, mastery, motivation, access to everything, feeling valued, feeling welcome, self-management, self-directed learning, safety. Absolutely. So I'm seeing the responses right now in this moment. I ask this question in so many different settings, and I always ask it without giving a model. I always ask it open-ended, and it's a really important question to ask in your setting as well, to really focus on what is the goal. If we do the right instruction for our students, if everything we try works, what is the end goal for students? So sometimes people answer this question by talking about instruction, like differentiation or things you want teachers to do. So if you did that, I want you to dig a little deeper and think, what is it if everyone differentiates? What will be the result for students? That's the end goal to keep in mind. And as we continue in this webinar, I want you to come back to that for yourself to really personalize it in terms of our goals. So it is in this context of trying to help every learner realize the goals we have. And they can be academic goals, like I've see here people are talking about reading comprehension, writing, being able to respond to higher order thinking tasks. It can be personal, self-directed learning, a sense of feeling valued. These are all important. So whatever our goals, we're in this work because we believe that every student, no matter where they come from, no matter who they are, when they come to our classrooms, they have access to opportunity. So at the end, they can graduate and pursue anything they wish to pursue. Now, sadly, a lot of the data in our schools shows us that despite our best intentions, despite us doing everything that we know to do that's best for our students, a lot of the pathways for many students, especially a lot of English learners, are dead end. This webinar is really about how do we change that trajectory? What essential shifts do we need to make? How do we ensure that every step along the way, every moment in the classroom, year to year, students are building on what they already know and getting to increasingly higher levels of learning? One of the most important shifts we have to make now in the field of English learner education, there's a tendency to really chase silver bullets. I just need more strategies. I just need this X curriculum. We need strategies and we need curriculum. They're all important, those tools. But a tool is not what builds a house. We need to focus on the verbs, because the verbs are really what make or break the impact of the tools we use. So in this webinar, I want you to learn and embody and use and take with you the 6 essentials for EL excellence. So this is a handout. If you've downloaded it, you have this handout. And if you haven't, don't worry, you can click after the webinar and access this handout that has these 6 essential verbs. On the outside of the circle, you see mindsets. Expect excellence from every English learner. Value English learner assets. There were many people who put as their goal that our students feel a sense of belonging. And if that's not currently happening, then there is a need for more of valuing English learner assets in the schools. Because the critical reflection question we ask with value is, does every student feel a sense of belonging and connection in my classroom? And not just belonging in the classroom, but belonging in the community of scholars. Belonging for excellence. Does every teacher have high expectations for every student, no matter what they look like, where they come from, and how different their cultural background may be? Those are the mindsets that really make or break what we do for teaching. In the center of the circle, you have 4 verbs that are the actions. And this cycle should look really familiar to anyone in education. My word choice is probably different than what you see often. Plan, teach, assess. Instead of teach, I use the word engage, because we need to actively engage every student in learning, and every English learner needs to be actively engaged in speaking, listening, reading, and writing. Otherwise, we're not really teaching them. They're not going to keep building up to reach those new opportunities. And then observe, I use the word observe instead of assess, because assess has so many connotations to us that limit it to something on a computer or something in the paper. Observe is where we assess, and that also includes watching students in the moment as we challenge them to meet high expectations, watching to learn. What are they doing well? What strengths do they bring? What assets do they bring in this moment? And then what are their challenges? Then support. Support is based on what we see the students. We design our supports strategically to help them reach higher levels. And reflect. How did my instruction impact the student learning? How will I adapt my approach to ensure every learner thrives? So at a glance, this just looks like good teaching. And really, it is very intentionally good teaching for all students. Because if we want to improve English learner instruction all day long in every classroom, we do need to ensure we start with a context of good teaching. And this is also more than good teaching. What's on the outside? The mindsets are really critical to expect excellence and value English learner assets. That's what makes or breaks good teaching for ELs. What might be good teaching for other students if teachers are really tuned in to how to tap into the strengths of their English learners. The other piece is reflection, that we're not just throwing out good strategies, we are reflecting on our impact continuously. So also included in that handout, and this is also throughout my new book and right in the first insert page, are these reflection questions. So for each essential, our ultimate goal is for every teacher to be asking these questions of themselves every day as part of planning. Just take a moment to look at these reflection questions. And of course, this is going to be recorded, so you can come back to this slide and spend more time on it if for any reason you haven't accessed the handout. But I want you to have this as a tool. It's a free tool to download. Come back to these questions. And in the middle, you do have those questions you see in professional learning communities. What are my goals for students? What does success look like? Where are my students in relationship to their goals, right? What supports do I need to provide? That's the piece. But then critically different from the traditional professional learning community question is the reflection. We don't just say, okay, if the student struggles, who do I refer them to for support? Which is what often happens in EL programs. Every teacher needs to be reflecting, wait, this student struggled. How am I going to change my teaching to ensure the student thrives? So looking again at these 6 essentials for excellence, I'm going to give a few examples, very specific examples and strategies you can use these essentials. And then I want you to reflect, what are your strengths for your own practice? Which of these essentials do you feel you embody the most in your work? Which questions you ask yourself in your practice every day already? And then where is there room for growth? So value is a mindset. Do we value the diversity of all of our students. Especially critical when there's a difference between the teacher's background, cultural background, socioeconomic background, language background, and the students. We have an asset mindset where every student feels a sense of belonging. One very, very simple way, simple action step that should absolutely be the way it's done in your school, no matter what, is that every single adult learns to pronounce the names of students the way that families pronounce the names. Now I'll share a story. When I was working as a reading specialist, I hosted a family literacy program and worked a lot with families and students in addition to working during the day with my own students. And I met one student through this process named Abel. I met him through his family, so I knew him as Abel. When I was in his class a few weeks later, I saw him. I said, "Hi, Abel." And he looked at me mortified. He correctly corrected me. "No, it's Abel." Looking around, embarrassed. So when a kid is ashamed of the sound of their own name, the way that their family pronounces it, there's a problem. That's one clear example of a student having to be someone else to fit in at school than who they are at home. When that's the setup in our schools, we're setting our English learners and any student who experiences that separation, we're setting them up for failure. So that's one action, and there are many specific actions to value English learner assets that are critically important to ensure every student feels a sense of belonging. Expectation, that is the other mindset. I put this picture of weights here because to remind me of 1 January when I went to the gym. I'm curious how many of you have had this experience where January comes around and you go, "Oh, maybe I should lift weights." So 1 January, I signed up for a personal training session, and the trainer watched me as I went through the motions of some things that I had tried on my own. And then she walked over to this machine and she pulled out the little pin and moved it down and stuck it in the weights again to increase the weights. Now, in that moment, I had this major aha. I went, "Oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like." I could feel that burn. And she said, "You know what? That is the number one mistake people make at the gym. They come through here, they go through the motions, and they don't get any of the benefit." As soon as she said that, I realized that sounds a lot like a lot of English learner programs I see. I see schools going through the motions of providing English learner services, buying English learner curriculum, or adopting English learner strategies, putting English learner support on the schedule, hiring English learner specialists to teach this support. And all of these things sound really good, but there's a missing piece in a lot of the programs that I see, which is the expectation of what students are doing is so far from the rigor of what they're expected to do in the core classrooms that it doesn't actually help the students go up that staircase of complexity towards increasing success and independence. That is a big factor why in many places, and in California where I do a lot of work, I live in California, I work internationally, but in California especially, I'm aware of it is one of the very few states that has quantified the number of long-term English learners. In 6th to 12th grade, 74% of the English learners in our 6th to 12th grade classrooms are long-term English language learners. So in this webinar, as I'm talking about English learners, of course, English learners are as diverse as any student in the world, okay? We have huge ranges in backgrounds, huge ranges in language, huge ranges in proficiency in the first language, second language, if they know a third language. So it's a very difficult group to just make any generalization about. And one trend that's important to consider when we talk about raising EL achievement is that in the vast majority of our instructional context, the vast majority of our English learners are at an expanding to bridging level of proficiency, meaning they are, or developing, they are at a level of proficiency where they understand the teacher. They can talk to their peers. They have a lot of social English and even academic English on very familiar topics. But the reason they're still English language learners is they are not performing at a level of rigor expected for success in core curriculum and to get opportunity, true opportunity in and beyond school. So we need to make sure our EL supports have high expectations. Our entire program designed for ELs really sees every English learner for their potential. That is a critical piece. Engage then is active, is every English learner actively participating? So this is where we teach every teacher, and I do a lot of work in this, in building capacity to switch from raising hands and only the dominant people who speak all the time and already understand the lesson objectives speak, and everyone else just sits there, to really up and moving, interactive, collaborative conversations that are not just beneficial to English learners, but really improve the instruction for the entire classroom. As students engage, we observe. Engage and observe go together. We're getting formative data in the moment. Formative data about what do students understand? What are their language strengths with the task? What do they not understand? What specifically do they not understand? What specifically are the language needs in this moment, in this task, with these high expectations? So engagement also includes annotating text and includes strategies for collaborating to write together. We watch as students engage in our tasks and gather formative data. And then, and only then, do we choose the supports that are the right supports to address the specific needs we observe. Of course, in a lesson, you have to predict what supports will be right for this lesson, and that's part of planning. But we can never stop there. We can never stop by saying, hey, everybody, just put these strategies into your lesson and you will officially meet the needs of English learners. It just doesn't work that way. We have to include and observe them as they engage and critically reflect. Is it working? And then provide the supports they need. So if a student, sometimes that might be linguistic frames, graphic organizers, word banks, there are many different supports that I spend a lot of time with, helping people learn. And I know if we brainstorm it with everyone on this webinar, we can come up with a huge list of the supports we know are powerful. They're valuable, they're tools. And we need reflection. Reflection is the critical piece. So we know the critical question is, how did my instruction impact student learning? How will I adapt my approach to ensure every learner thrives? So think for a moment in your own setting. When an English learner struggles, what is, if you're a classroom teacher, how do you respond? If you are in a position of influence, and really everyone who came to this webinar on a Monday, right, in your time, you're a leader, whether your job title has leader or not, because you're in a position to go back and share the wealth, share the knowledge with other people. The colleagues you work with, the other people you influence who work with kids. When an English learner fails in the classroom, what is the response? Is it to blame the students and their families? Is it to blame the fact they're English learners? Is it to refer them to a specialist or say, hey, I can't help them, I don't have that credential? Or is it to reflect, how will I adapt to ensure every learner thrives? That's a mindset we have to all have together, which requires a lot of humility to be learners together. So take a moment and just reflect on these and think, which of these are the greatest strength in my own work? Like, I'm really good at structuring active engagement, which is why I have to be honest. A webinar it's still a foreign. I've done a lot of webinars, but it's not my normal style. I do highly interactive sessions where I can see you all and have you interacting. You never listen to me talk for more than a few minutes before I have you do something. Think for yourself, what is one of your greatest strengths? And in a moment, I'll have you respond actually to another question, which is then to think about what are your greatest challenges. So this is a handout as well that's part of the webinar handouts. And I've also included the URL for the EL Excellence Companion website where you can download this, you can download the first page of the handout, and there's some other tools as well. So you don't need it right now. You can stay with us, but just so you know, it's there. Why all 6 essentials matter. So I created this because I really want to make sure everyone understands this really critical point, which is that all 6 of these must happen together. If you take one out, like you take out value, everything else you're doing, you have your high expectations, your engagement strategies, everyone's observing students, providing amazing supports, right? You did all these trainings and great support strategies, even reflecting. But with all but value, ELs experience that disconnection between school and self. And school devalues and demotivates. So the evidence is students are not motivated. If students are not motivated, we need to ask ourselves, why? How do we shift what we're doing to create that motivation? What of our practices might be demotivating students? If we have everything in place, we do value our English learner assets, but we have low expectations. Then English learners get a watered down curriculum. It's really a whole separate path. Everything but engage, ELs sit passively in class. So we have these great curriculum, we have these great strategies, but the kids who most need to participate are silent. Every one of these matters. So think about these, reflect on these, and I'm going to share with you some humble reflection, because the reality is, for growth, we do have to, and especially in a leadership position, we have to model humility. We have to model that questions are more important than answers. If we know everything, then our data should be different. And we have a lot of work to do in our profession to raise achievement for all students. So for me, I can think about when I first started teaching. I had very high expectations and definitely valued my students. I had many English language learners in a 5th grade classroom who were mostly beyond the emerging or entering English level, more the developing, expanding levels of English, but struggling in their academic literacy. And I went in there all full of ambition and high hopes. And this is what I saw. Every task I tried, my students struggled. So I put out a safety net. Let me catch them. Let me catch them every time. I provided supports, and this is all out of purely good intentions. I want to help my students. I'm going to provide supports. I am not going to let them fail. What I recognized, and it took me a while to recognize it, is that the supports I was providing were actually a wall, a barrier to them achieving at higher levels. So that is one way that I have gotten stuck in my career, is dropping my expectations to try to protect my students. And I'm learning to be more comfortable structuring, challenge, productive struggle, watching when I don't know exactly what's going to happen, to let students take the lead, the initiative, and move forward. Your turn now. I'd like you to reflect. Of these 6 essentials for EL excellence, what is one that you see is the greatest priority and opportunity for your professional growth? Now, you can answer this question. In a moment, we're going to put up a poll for you. You can answer this question for yourself personally, or think about it in terms of your school or your district or your region, depending on the level and the quantity of schools and classrooms that you personally influence in your job. When you think about these 6 essentials, what is one that you see a need to bolster, to improve, to learn and do better for your English learners? Jeff, would you please post the poll? There we go. Okay, so click on one, and it's okay if it's a hard decision. Go with your first instinct. We're going to give you about, I'll give you 20 more seconds, and then we'll post the results. So value, having an asset mindset for students. Is that a challenge in your setting? Having high expectations. Is that the next level of growth for your setting? Structuring active engagement conversations. Watching students. Is that the next level of learning for you or in your setting? Providing the just right level of support or reflection. Just take another 5 seconds, pick one word, and click submit. All right, and if you're watching the recording of this too, it's valuable to take a time to reflect on this. And if there are other people in the room, discuss together, try to prioritize. What would be your tops? So Jeff, could we see the results? It's coming. It's in. All right, priority for growth in this group, we're all across the board, people have different priorities, with engage as a high priority. Interesting. I recently was doing a training all for instructional coaches. And when I asked them this question, and then I added to it because I had all the people in the room, first they had to answer for themselves. Then at each table, I challenged them. I said, I want you to come up with 2 priorities that you all agree on, which is a great strategy if you want to engage people in a conversation where they're not just going through the motions, but they're really making claims and supporting their ideas and debating. Ask your students to prioritize out of a select group of choices for something that's relevant to them. So the conversations were rich, and the coaches identified observe and reflect, that they saw the greatest needs in the teachers they serve. Here we have engage. And there's no right answer, just helpful to reflect on what your next level is. Okay, take a look at this screen. Let's use metaphor, another good learning strategy. What does this image have to do with EL programs and services in your setting? So often we work in silos, and I see this at all levels. I see it from national, state, regional, district, site, classroom, that the people with the EL hat can be in a separate department than people working in literacy. The people who are serving the kids can be in silos. And one of the implications of this, that especially at the school level, if English learners go to a separate class for services, like a pull-out or a push-in or a small point of the day, let's say we really build the capacity of that English learner specialist or ESOL specialist to excel, to have EL excellence, to embody all of these verbs. But the core classroom teachers, we don't empower with that knowledge. What happens? This is what the English learner's instructional day looks like. So it's not enough to have really strong English learner support programs. We need to improve core instruction. And core instruction typically means a core classroom teacher who's a content specialist, or who teaches all the subjects depending on the grade, who has many students in the classroom, not just English learners, right? So going to English learner professional development, reading a book on English learners may not be their top priority. To reach the core teachers, we need to start where the core teachers are. What are their top priorities? Reaching all students. And in that context of best instruction for all students, empower them with the specific mindsets and tools to excel with English learners. Collaboration is critical, no matter what our role is. We need to collaborate to help move this change, because it is a paradigm shift. To really ignite EL excellence in every single classroom, it takes redrawing the lines of how we traditionally work in silos. So you could take all 6 essentials and just start with co-expect excellence. One activity I have teachers do a lot in schools is collaborate to clarify their expectations, collaborate to create an exemplar, right? We collaborate to identify ways to build on students' strengths, to value EL's assets, right? Collaborate to plan, and collaborate to observe, and collaborate to support and reflect. That's where we have the greatest power. I'm going to give you 2 scenarios. Take a moment and look at this scenario. This is one way of collaborating for EL achievement. I'm curious. Now, if you were in the room together, I do so many engagement strategies, right? I'd have you do some thumbs up, thumbs down, talk to partners. But just think about it. And how does that compare to this? So what's problematic? Let's actually just use the chat feature for a moment. Oops, let's go back here. What's problematic about this? If anything here looks problematic to you, I'd like you to just type it in the chat box. Silver bullet, not specific. Oh, a shutdown statement. Absolutely. Yeah, one person's thinking and not saying, right? In the middle. It's a vague question. Help me with my ELs is way too vague. That's just asking for me to throw a bunch of EL strategies on you that you're not going to necessarily know how to apply. Yes, no team mindset. It's our kids, not my kids, right? We need that team mindset. Very good. I appreciate all these responses people are sharing. That sense of responsibility. So in this feature, people are not having ownership for English learners. And then that's actually me there saying use the silver bullet strategy. I didn't actually do that. I just wrote this fictional dialogue. But that's me there saying, here, let me solve your problem for you. And so people come to me, I solve their problem, we're all happy. Well, no. Yeah, jumping to conclusions, it's very superficial. But the work that I lead with teachers, and this is also really powerful in the co-teaching and collaboration that my colleagues Honingsfeld and Dove have written about, and I recommend their books and approach as well, is collaborating. You know, in Opening Doors to Equity, I really focus on, and this is actually from a video from the Opening Doors to Equity work, we're getting teachers together to collaborate around a very ambitious goal. And then we watch students. And then after watching students, we get all those generalizations from our lessons, and we take each challenge and then we collaborate. How will we address this? Notice the language of shared ownership. How can we address this? What if we try? So there's shared ownership, there's empowerment, there's agency. Just last week, I was working with a group of teachers who were analyzing student work together. And these were teachers who the conversations before were, I just want EL strategies. I need EL strategies, right? Or, hey, somebody take my ELs and give them what they need. Well, I've been working with them on getting clarity about their expectations, getting clarity about where students are around a very specific goal. And the 6th grade teacher just had this massive aha. Oh, I see what they need. Oh, I can teach that. As soon as the goal is clear, as soon as the need is clear, then that agency is there. Like, I'm a teacher, I can teach this. And you know what? A lot of my students need that same thing. So it breaks down that myth that teaching English learners in a core classroom is about finding something to do with the rest of your class. It breaks down this myth that someone else needs to come in and take over. Really important. So let me just, for the purpose of helping our brains connect the same content in different ways, go back to that goal you set at the beginning, the goal you most urgently want to impact in your setting. And maybe another one has come to mind since then. Some of you talked about specific academic goals like reading comprehension, writing. Some of you talked about motivation and maybe self-directed student learning, higher order thinking. These are different goals. So value, of course, is always part of this. Expect, that mindset of expect is asking, what is the goal? What is the destination we want for our students? Then we engage and observe students to see, where are my students right now in relationship to that goal? Now, what support do I need to provide to get them there? And then reflect, did it work? It is in this context that we best teach the essentials for EL excellence. In this webinar, I've introduced them in a very general way. But the real way I build capacity beyond that general introduction of a framework is to dive down into a goal that really matters. Let me give you an example. So a lot of districts that I work with, I mean, in any district, I always start with, what are all your initiatives? Because usually there's way too many and everyone's in overwhelm. But we look at them, what are the cross-cutting threads? What are the big ideas? Where's the synthesis? And let me tell you, big ones that tend to come up again and again. Critical thinking, collaboration and communication, academic conversations, which of course is communication, literacy. So this isn't representing everyone's priority, but this is a huge one, and it's really informed the focus of a lot of my work and definitely my new book. So here's one example actually from EL Excellence Every Day, where we take, we build capacity in the essentials, teach strategies to engage, teach strategies to support. But then the critical piece that's often missing in a lot of EL trainings is actually applying all that to the context of teaching a rigorous academic goal. So let's take this one, justify claims with text evidence. Huge priority in a lot of places. We start with the purpose, right? Why do we do this? To strengthen the power of my voice, help others understand my perspective. Oh, that's one of my driving purposes in my work with ELs. Strengthen the power of student voices, help students speak in ways where people understand. Justifying claims with evidence, it's a skill that helps me speak and write with influence in and beyond school. So having purpose is part of the motivation. Then having very clear success criteria of what are our literacy goals, what are our language goals, and to go even a step further, to get clear about high expectations. It's not enough to have the standards or the success criteria bullet points there. Together as teachers, we need to collaborate to get clarity on what does success look like and help our students get clarity on what does success look like. And any of you familiar with the visible learning research, you know this aligns very strongly with those goals as well. So we can look at an exemplar in terms of the content expectations, which is what I'm talking about right now. But again, come back to that same exemplar to look at the language goals. And I'm looking, okay. This was actually that aha. I was telling you about the 6th grade teacher that had the aha. 6th grade teachers were analyzing essays like this, short responses to a text-dependent question where the students were using evidence and explaining evidence and looking at what were the students that were on grade level, what were the ones that were approaching, and then we looked at all the English learner samples. And now this is a school district with a small percent of English learners. I'm really trying to help illuminate for the teachers, okay, for your English learners in your class, unique individual students, what do you see? What do you see for each student? And then what are some cross-cutting threads? And I was asking, so some teachers would say, that I know it's English learners, I can just tell. Okay, how? Why? What do you notice? I kept drilling down to get them specific. And one teacher said, it's just choppy. It just doesn't flow. It didn't look like what you see on your screen right here. But then I said, well, show me an example of what does flow. And one thing that they started noticing was this. What you see by this first yellow check. This means her father believes. So after the text evidence, the student then said, this means that. So that was the aha. The teacher's like, oh, so I could then show the teacher, look, this is you using this as a referent, and it really doesn't matter if you know the grammatical term for it, but that you understand the concept. This specifically is one way to show students to support their thinking with explanation and to connect their explanation to the evidence. So we engage students in a task, annotating, talking about a text-dependent question, using evidence to support their thinking, collaborating to write, the color-coded writing strategy, that's one I outline in my book as well, that helps students really focus on the language and slow down together to focus on the success criteria, very powerful. Then as students engage, we observe, get more specific about the support. Now this again, this is a page from my book, and there's a lot of text on this page. So if you really want to read the whole page, come back to the recording and look at it. But let me just show you this. The concept here is that this is how we need to connect from our formative data to our supports. If students are doing this, then what am I going to do? This is very different than saying, here are 10 EL strategies you should use all the time. Okay, so I'm going to go down to the 3rd row. Students use relevant text evidence, but don't explain how the evidence supports the inference or the claim. I see this need consistently. As teachers get into the depth of analyzing the writing, this comes up again and again. Okay, so now we know we can go back to an exemplar and model expectations there. We have different strategies we can use. Furthermore, the supports we provide, we can use conversation prompts and linguistic frames. That is a strategy that's been around a very long time for English learners, but it's not just use prompts and frames. It's let's focus in, let's zero in on the explain your thinking. Let's engage students in asking each other's questions. And again, a shout out to Jeff Sweers, who really influenced me years ago in this approach of really getting the students to ask each other questions. So it's not just a linguistic frame, but you also have the prompts. So focusing lessons on having students explain thinking, having students always ask each other, what do you mean by that? You know what's really powerful about that question? Please explain. Tell me more about that. That's actually an incredibly powerful question for teachers. Teachers often feel this pressure with English learners, like I need to know where students are coming from, I need to know all their background knowledge, all their culture. And you can't, especially with a very culturally diverse class. You can be curious, learn some of different students' language, and it's very good to be curious and try to learn about different cultures. But a great way to learn about students and their background knowledge is to ask them higher order questions, having them express their interpretations, their thinking. And then in that moment, when a student says something and you think, that does not make any sense at all, instead of showing that on your face or saying that in your response, which would not be very helpful, asking, what do you mean by that? Could you explain? I can't even tell you how many teachers in the process of collaborative observation inquiry, where we plan and watch students, we plan, teach, watch students, and reflect together. How many times I've had teachers have big ahas in the moment where a teacher asks, what do you mean by that? And the student explains their thinking. And suddenly, this very different perspective that the teacher had never even considered comes to life. That goes beyond standards, that goes beyond tests. That is communication across cultural perspectives. So that, if you take nothing else away from this webinar, this right here is a powerful strategy, right? Just giving response time, asking that question, and then ask, tell me more about your idea. Giving students time to explain their thinking. It's powerful and important, and it's important to really encourage the diverse perspectives in the classroom. And it's not you're speaking for your whole culture. Don't ever want to put a student in that position. It's, I'm learning how you think, and through that, I'm learning more about you, and that's going to help me be a better teacher for you and help us grow as a community. So the supports are structured based on what's needed. And then, of course, again, we come back to reflection, right? Did it work? Now, as a coach, as a trainer, as someone who often wears the expert hat, it is fundamentally important to me that I'm very humble and always learning. Because the moment I become too confident in knowing all the answers, I lose my capacity to really build other people as learners. And I say this with reflection because I had this moment where I was with a team, we collaborated, we planned the lesson, and in the lesson, I'm watching the teacher is using all these great support strategies that I've trained him in, right? And engagement structures that I've trained him in. He's using them. And in this moment, I'm seeing the students just have very canned responses, very predictable responses. And outside of that task, they were having much higher level thinking, elaborating much more. So I could see in that moment, this strategy is getting in the way of the kids. I had a choice in that moment. I could take notes on the evidence that the strategy that I had so proudly shared with this group wasn't working, or not. And a lot of us, the way our brains are wired, we tend to not pay attention to evidence that challenges our own thinking. But we in the profession of learning, we must pay attention to the evidence that challenges our own thinking and do it boldly and publicly together with others. That's how we collaborate and move mountains. So I brought that evidence back to the teams, like, hey, here's what I noticed, here's what I heard the students saying. And seeing that evidence, the other teachers could reflect, wow, those strategies didn't really work in that moment. So we could plan or engage in support to the next level, adapt, change what we're doing. So we're not taking ELs on a plateau, we're bringing them up that staircase of learning. This is also from my new book, Quick Guide to Adapt Supports According to Need. We need to not just talk about adding supports, but losing supports. What supports are you going to choose or lose? Like the sentence frame. A sentence frame is very powerful, and it can be problematic, right? Giving a word bank, it's powerful, and it can be problematic, right? So paying attention to students and knowing when to increase, when to decrease. Powerful thing on word banks, I love structuring the active engagement with the minimal supports, watching students, hearing the word choices they make, putting those up to start a word bank. So I'm starting with the words they bring. That's another way to connect to students' assets. to connect on their strengths. The word bank comes from the students. It's a way to validate to your students who don't need the word bank. And then you add the higher level words. And you have students engage and participate again, trying to expand their word choice. So supports are always in flux. Now in this webinar, I really focused on the essentials, and you should see them down the left side. Those verbs should look very familiar to you. Expect, engage, observe, support, reflect. I didn't put value here. It is very important, but with regard to supports in this moment, I'm focusing on language. So for every question that we ask about content learning, we also need to ask the same question about language learning. What are my goals? What aspects of language must students understand and use to excel with these goals? Engaging and observing students, whether it's observing them talk, which is critical, structuring active talk every day in every lesson, or analyzing their writing. What language choices do they make? What do they reveal about students' strengths and needs with language, essential for success? You know, there's a lot of work in the field around helping teachers write language objectives or try to anticipate the language demands of a task. And I've led a lot of that work. I have to say, I find teachers learn the language demands of a task best by having students try it and noticing the language choices they make. You learn about what's hard, but you also learn about what students do, and then you can get more specific. That's just like my word bank story. You want to actively engage students in challenge, observe, watch, build on the strengths we see, and then go to the next level. That's how we learn about the needs of language and support the needs of language. So again, you can come back to this. This is in my book. You can also come back to this slide if you want to spend more time with these questions. The essential point being focus on language. So it's my hope that you take these 6 essentials for EL excellence, many of which are already core to your practice, and really let the verbs drive your work, because it's through our verbs, our actions, that we have agency. It's through verbs that we embody power for our students, but that we also help other teachers who maybe think that educating English learners is somebody else's job, feel their own sense of agency and power and realize, wait, these are my students. These are our students in the context of reaching every single student in my classroom. I can help my English learners be successful. I can help them realize increasingly higher levels of success and self-directed learning. Very excited now to take questions. I think Jeff's going to come back in and moderate.
Yes, hello. I have some questions for you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Terrific.
I can.
Oh, terrific. Here we go. Collaboration with EL trained practitioners needs to be more integrated within the school. How do you support, or how would you support better integration, better collaboration in the classroom?
I really appreciate that. And I'm definitely, again, going to recommend co-teaching and collaboration. And I appreciate a comment I'm seeing as well. Sarah, thank you so much for your comment too, where I'm stressing core teachers having agency. I don't mean to marginalize in any mean the ESOL specialists and ESL specialists, because we want to best have the expertise of people who know language and know English learners the best, support with the classroom teacher, and to bring that together. So anytime you are collaborating around a specific goal as humble learners, that's going to be the most powerful way. So one of the challenges too to make it happen in the classroom, I go back to that question, is time, and it's setting up the structures. One faulty structure that can happen, and I've had a lot of ESL and ESOL specialists tell me, hey, I feel so uncomfortable. I don't know, like, you know, I'm kind of new here, or my staff doesn't always listen to me. And there can be some peer tension around this idea of like, hey, I have knowledge I'm trying to share with you, and you don't want my knowledge. So anytime we can be co-learners, like, let's roll up our sleeves together around an ambitious goal, and let's plan, and let's watch students, and let's observe. And in that context, both teachers have a very critical role, every teacher who's in that, whether it's a pair or whether it's a group, to share their expertise. So that it's rather than setting up this hierarchy that one teacher has all the knowledge and has to deliver it, but that the two are learning together, because then we're brainstorming and that expertise comes out in that context. Terrific. Yes, Co-Teaching and English Learners, just published by Maria Dove. Andrea Honingsfield is at Corwin.com. Thank you, Maura. Yes, love their work.
Terrific. I have another question. How would you approach a very large EL class with different ability levels in one class as compared to smaller classroom settings?
I work almost entirely in large classrooms, and part of it's because of, so in California we have a large percent of ELs and don't actually have the funding often to have an ESOL specialist. So how do you work with many students? There's different ways, and then, you know, I have to give the short answer here, right? In my book, I go into everyday differentiation, how to make differentiation work in the real world. It's a combination. It's a combination of strategies where part of it is when you are whole class, some of instruction is whole class, taking that approach where you actively engage with the minimum level of scaffold where everyone can know what to do. You gather those first assets that come out, those strengths, like you notice the language choices students make, and use those as the beginning of your scaffolds, and then you can come back in and provide the next level of scaffold and support for the students who need it. The other ones who are at that next level continue. So that's one piece, but it's definitely integrating, you know, using, if you have emerging English learners really in the, or entering to emerging, if you're talking with a WIDA terminology of levels, definitely using total physical response, asking for choice response, choose this or this, yes or no. Sometimes there needs to be a way where every student can respond and is not just sort of written off as like, oh, you're in the silent phase. Even if you're not speaking, you can still make an active choice.
Terrific. I have one last question for you. Of the 6 essentials, what is the most important to you and why?
I appreciate that question. You know, I would probably answer that differently on different days because all 6 are essential. I am focusing a lot these days on expect excellence because I am seeing the prevalence of low expectations in contexts where kids have traditionally underperformed, and to disrupt those predictable outcomes so they're not predictable, to change the story and open new possibilities, really creating high expectations, not just giving it lip service, right? Because we all kind of probably agree we have high expectations, that's the goal, but getting clarity together about those expectations I find is tremendously empowering. It unites people around a shared vision, but very close with that is valuing English learner assets.
Terrific, thank you. That brings us to the end of the questions.
Thank you so much, Tonya and Jeff, and if you could advance to the next slide, please. I wanted to let you all know that we will be following up with you all before the end of the week with your PD certificate of attendance and copies of the recorded sessions, which you're free to share, and that Tonya's book, upon which this webinar is based, is available at Corwin at an ongoing 20% savings at Corwin.com. And if you don't hear back from us, it means you probably opted out, in which case just email me directly at mora.sullivan@corwin.com. I've been participating in the chat feature, and if we can move on to the next slide, please. I also wanted to mention the fact that Tonya is actually leading an institute this April alongside Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry, and as special thanks for having participated in this webinar, I will, within our emails, I will send out to you a special offer to take $50 off of your webinar registration. So many, many thanks to all of you. Tonya especially, have a simply wonderful day, and thank you for us East Coasters in particular, just kind of sitting through this during the dinner hour, and talk to you all soon. So thanks so much.